Okay, so this week, I do have quite a lot of slides this week. The thing I find quite ha challenging as a teacher in using the Zoom, I like to use PowerPoints because I think it's quite helpful for us to read things. But it's quite challenging when I'm teaching coming in and out and in and out with the PowerPoints, stopping and pausing. So last week I didn't use a lot of PowerPoints. This week you're not going to see so much of my face because I've got a few more PowerPoints that I want to share. But you'll hear me. And there'll be a little bit dot on the side. There is a way on your on your Zoom, that you can actually drag the image of me and make it larger, and then have the PowerPoints on the left, one side, and have me on the other, if that's helpful. But I can't do that you need to do that for your side. But there's a way you can sort of drag the image of me and make it a little bit larger on the screen. But I can't, it's more challenging for me. But you might want to just Google that and see how to do that if that's something you want to do in the future when there's a lot of PowerPoint, material. But first of all, what we're going to do is start with a meditation. Just really around what we discussed last week. I'd like to use a meditation at the beginning just to tune in again, remind us of what we went over last week. So just taking a couple of minutes to settle into our meditation position, whatever's comfortable for us. Taking a couple of deep breaths just to breathe in, inhale, and just release and relax any tension in the body as we exhale. Allow that to release on the out breath. And breathing in as we inhale, just breathing as deeply as we can through the diaphragm, through the stomach area, and then exhale, release, and relax. And just a minute to settle on the breath, being with the inhalation and exhalation at the tip of the nostrils, or the inhalation and exhalation at the level of the abdomen. Just being present with that breathing process. We'll do that for a minute. Again, just to calming and bring the mind more present, more clear here. Checking in with your own motivation for coming to this class, just clarifying that in your mind. So now we're going to do a short contemplation on the meaning of our human life, a meditation on the preciousness of human life to inspire us to utilize our Buddha nature. Precious Human Rebirth meditation that comes at the beginning of the Lam Rim is to inspire us to transform this continuity consciousness that we have, this Buddha nature, into goodness, into all the potential it has, all the way up to become enlightened. It gives us kind of this energy to do that if we do this meditation at the beginning at the Lam Rim. So last week I mentioned how in the view the Buddhist teachings on karma and the continuity consciousness, we've been in this round of rebirth, according to the Buddhist view, we've always had continuity consciousness. And we've been circling in rebirth since like beginningless time. Now that's quite a hard pill to swallow. But at least we try to get a connection with this, a feeling of this continuity consciousness. And if that's the case, we've had previous lives. Then in the view of the precious human rebirth, we've got this, we've gifted ourselves what we call this life, this precious human life. I mentioned last week we have a Dharma privilege. Because with this human life right now, we have human intelligence. We don't just have a human body, but we have a spiritual curiosity that wants to investigate the Dharma, spiritual knowledge, find a deeper meaning, context for our life. And in view of meeting the Buddha Dharma, these teachings were investigating the opportunity to achieve enlightenment. We have Dharma teachers, we have these valid teachings, and we have, great masters still living who embody the qualities of the teachings. So, having these conditions in our life, as well as the basic freedom we have from our own side, being in a country where we have access to any kind of spiritual teachings we like, and especially the Buddha Dharma coming from Asia, coming from Tibet and India. And it's like we have it right now on our desktop, This incredible rich tradition. So it's something that we say is quite rare, actually, when we look around all the beings in the world, especially not just the human realm, the animal realm. We can see the condition of the world right now is very, very challenging. And there's few people that share our good fortune, or this Dharma privilege. And it's often the case that analogies really, really help to kind of make clear how we're supposed to feel, with this precious human life. So in one sutra, the Buddha illustrates this by giving an analogy of how precious and rare our human existence is, with all these causes and conditions that we have in the palm of your hand right now. So suppose, just imagine there exists a vast and a deep ocean. It's like the Pacific Ocean, or like really, really the biggest ocean. What's it, the Pacific Ocean? That's the biggest ocean. And on its surface, there's a golden yolk. And it's just floating randomly across the ocean. From place to place, just thrown by the waves, the wind. And at the bottom of this ocean, there lives a blind turtle who surfaces only once in every 100,000 years. So he lives there for, thousands of years, and then only every 100,000 years, he comes to the top of the ocean and he raises his head through, he comes to the top and just looks up the top of the ocean and goes back down again. So what would be the chance that turtle, when he raises its head through the middle and actually discovers the yolk, his head goes through the yolk? Remember, he's only coming up every 100,000 years. And that yolk's just randomly floating across the top of the ocean. What's the chances that his head's going to meet the yolk? And of course, the Buddha, when he illustrated this point, his disciple Ananda said that, well, of course, it would be very rare. So the Buddha said, in that context, that's the same situation with our human life. not just human, but precious human life. You know, the causes and conditions for us to meet Dharma, meet pure spiritual teachings, meet pure spiritual masters. From our side, have the curiosity, the merit, the karma to be open and meet that is very, very rare. To be born in a not just a human though, but a human with the spiritual curiosity and the merit, the kind of good fortune to meet the Dharma and to be able to practice. It's like we're the blind turtle who met the yoke when we came up to the top of the ocean, poked ourselves out. So just think about that for a moment. We might not feel that right away, but these analogies give us a little bit of sense of how fortunate we are in the view of the Buddha, the awakened one, that one can see all phenomena, all beings' minds. The other analogy used is, you know, imagine all the grains of sand below that ocean. Infinite, infinite, infinite amount of grains of sand. It's uncountable. So like that, you know, that imagine that's all the infinite beings, human, non-human, animal, spirit, infinite amount of beings. So those, out of those, imagine we put a grain of sand just on our thumbnail. How much sand we can fit on our that covers the nail of our thumb. That's how many beings get precious human life in comparison to all the infinite beings. So why this contemplation comes at the beginning of the Lam Rim, again, it's to kind of inspire us and really to wake us up from this kind of blind spot of not seeing, really connecting deeply with our good fortune. As I said, we've gifted ourselves this precious human life. So unless we really recognize that, we may not recognize the need or put the effort in to again make sure our future lives we're in good stead, you know. We meet the Dharma, we meet spiritual teachers, we have a deep, you know, a spiritual appetite for liberation and enlightenment. The next two levels of spiritual happiness that we're trying to achieve on the Lam Rim path. So we've already used our Buddha nature this far to get up the mountain, our delusions. So we just need to keep going with this precious human life, this precious human existence. And to do that, the kind of first stop is the first way we want to develop our mind is in refuge, getting a strong sense of refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So as we see here, you know, we see in this image the blind turtle. So we are blinded by ignorance right now. You know, we're the turtle that only gets this human rebirth. It doesn't happen every lifetime. But when we do, when our head does go through the yoke, you know, then we have the opportunity. The yoke is like the teachings of the Dharma. You know, it's like we've won the lottery and we've met the Dharma and we have in the palm of our hands this ability, this preciousness to change our mind, to transform our Buddha nature into the three levels of spiritual happiness, good future rebirth, liberation, and enlightenment, step by step. And again, in the lower, in the beginning, we need to get a strong sense, develop a strong sense of refuge. So just to begin the class, That's why we always start. Refuge is the basis for all our different praxis and realizations in this tradition. So that much more develop refuge, that much more it's like the earth, everything else can grow from there. So whether we've taken refuge or not, traditionally we always start with this practice of just taking refuge at whatever level we are. We're all taking refuge right now in the Dharma, listening to the teachings, contemplating them, meditating on them, doing the reading wherever we are. So that's our refuge right now. And for the purpose of this class, for reading again, for listening again, do the refuge prayer. Just imagine the Buddha spontaneously appearing as he does in this image here in the space before us. Golden, beautiful golden body of a golden hue. Very peaceful, radiant, in the lotus posture, embodying all the qualities up to enlightenment, and shining on me and all sentient beings around us. We just imagine all our friends, family, all living beings seeking refuge from Buddha, and the Dharma and the Sangha. And we do this and we just chant a few mantras again of the Shakyamuni Buddha mantra, just to lift and inspire the mind for the class. So we'll do once in Tibetan, twice in English. Sangye chodan soge chognamla chanju bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chinso ge beso namge drola penjir sangye druparshog. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Tayada Om Mune Mune Ma Munaye Soha Tayada Om Mune Mune Ma Munaye Soha Tayada Om Mune Mune Ma Munaye Soha Tayada Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soha Tayada Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soha. Okay, so I'll just go back to this slide. So I'm sure some of you may have heard of this analogy before of the turtle, the blind turtle at the bottom of the ocean and finding the golden yolk. I mean, it's kind of almost impossible, isn't it? I mean, you can't imagine, it's almost like this impossibility if the whole world did lottery and you won it, you know? It's that kind of improbability. So this is how the Buddha saw with his enlightened wisdom, to get what we have, it's not just being a human, it's having a human with all these kind of, it's kind of eight freedoms and 10 richnesses, which I'm not going to go into depth with because I'm thinking you went over them in a previous module. Anyone want to confirm that? Who's been through, how many of us have been through all these modules with Thupten Norbuling? Robert's putting his hand up. Robert, this was covered in a previous module?
I apologize. I missed what the subject was on this. What were you, what were you asking for?
The precious human rebirth.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely have covered it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And this analogy is familiar to you? You've heard it before?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Read it in one of the La Rim books and meditated.
I mean, how do you find, I mean, anyone else? I find it's quite a powerful analogy to really think about how fortunate we are. Zayla, you have your hand up?
Sorry, that was an automatic hands up with Zoom. I
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Maybe Matt, since you're up on the screen, have you heard this analogy before, Matt? Yeah. How do you find it? Do you find it kind of helpful?
Well, well, of course, it brings you to the point.
Yeah. And it kind of it's sort of it's almost like a bit of a wake-up call when you hear it. It's like I'm that fortunate, you know? It just kind of like, whoa, really? It's that much, I mean, we don't always feel it. Once you've heard it a few times, you might think, oh yeah, I've heard that before. But the idea is when the more we study, we reflect, we meditate, we purify, we should feel that as much as possible. When we meditate on precious human rebirth, we want to feel that fortune, even though in the world there's so much heavy stuff going on right now. Yeah, there's a lot of change, challenges, difficulty. Actually, according to astrology, many astrologers, this is a very black year, astrologically speaking, and we can see that. So, however, if we're Dharma practitioners, what we can hold on to is that we still have, no one can take that away from you. The preciousness in meeting the Dharma, this secret key we always have, like under no understanding as a Dharma practitioner, or starting to understand how happiness is really, it's an internal factor. It's not something that's eventually we can change our mind to always be experiencing happiness, no matter what is going on out there. And that's what we utilize our precious human rebirth to do, to create all the causes of inner peace and happiness. So no matter what's going on out there, our mind stays stable, strong, happy, patient, compassionate. So that's something we always have. That's a wealth we always have once we meet the Dharma and once we understand slowly, slowly how to shift the mind into the Dharma, to slowly, slowly move out our own internal suffering and its causes. Nima and Efisha raised their hand. Would you like to share something?
Yeah, Venerable. I've heard in other teachings that Buddhism will at some point will disappear. So does that mean that at some point we will not be able to have a precious human rebirth? Because without the teachings, there will be no precious human rebirth?
Anyone else want to take a stab at that from their understanding? So it's not me all the time. Anyone else interested to maybe share any understanding they, if you don't know, it's fine, but I'm just curious to see if we've got anyone else who'd like to share. So yes, that's correct. These teachings, from my understanding, they've been around, the Buddha was in this here, descended onto this earth about 2,500 years ago. So the teachings are predicted to last around another 2,000 years, is my understanding. And in that period, they gradually do. The teachings themselves don't degenerate, but our minds degenerate. So there's less and less interest. So as practitioners and having beings who have realizations, all that starts to degenerate, and eventually the teachings do die out because of our lack of merit, as human beings. I mean, you can even see now, we're talking about precious human rebirth because there's many, many people in the world who they're not thinking of future lives. They're not necessarily, I mean, there's many religious people as well, but even understanding the main concepts of one's own religion is not often easy because the religion maybe wasn't preserved in a pure way or in a way that people can clearly understand what these great masters taught. So in terms of the Buddha Dharma, it's going to become like that. We'll have less and less practitioners and masters just because of our level of merit, and they will eventually degenerate and phase out. So that's always why, that's one of the aspects of precious human rebirth. There's these 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses, which again you can find in the Lamrim yearbook. I'm not going to go into them at the topic of this class, but one of the aspects is the Dharma's here now, because it's not always going to be here, right? That's one of the points of the precious human rebirth, the rarity of it, for it to be present in this world, alive, all the lineages of teachings. I mean, it's not just Tibetan Buddhist Dharma, you've got other Buddhist traditions that meet the minds of different people, the capacities of different people. So that's why we need to think strongly. I mean, this is why it's one of the motivating factors. It's never clear the teachings will degenerate. There's many eons when it's a dark, and there's no spiritual teachings that can guide one into virtue, into happiness, a future lives, liberation, and enlightenment. So that is one of the aspects, the rarity of having all this right now available to us. And of course, it depends on one's own individual merit and karma. I mean, if the teachings aren't surviving in this world system, but we have the karma, we've created the causes and conditions, the merit to meet the Dharma, we will meet the Dharma somewhere else. Yeah, it's very much dependent on, it's dependent on our individual karma and what we create, what we meet. There's other world systems. There's also pure lands, which you can create the cause to go to after this life, to study and practice, where you don't have a heavy human body that's under the control of birth, old age, sickness, and death. So you can also create the karma to go there. There's different praxis to do that. One of the main ones is Amitabha Pure Land. It's one of the easier ones to go to. And there's different praxis we can do to pray to be reborn there. And even His Holiness the Dalai Lama taught the Kala Chakra extensively so that people would meet the Dharma in other places and other times when the Dharma doesn't exist in this world system, in this earth. And it's not that the Buddha says, oh, I'm fed up with these guys, I'm taking a break, The Buddhas are not like that. It's because we don't have the merit. That's a very key thing. It's not that the Buddhas disappear because the Buddha says, I'm just going to come, I'm going to teach and have all these spiritual masters come for 4,000 years and then we're taking a break. No, they're constantly sending out emanations, and we'll look at this when we go into the qualities of Buddha. They can constantly send out emanations to do with the quality of our mind, our merit. How much are we interested in that? I mean, the Dharma centers are here. Anyone can come. Spiritual centers are here, but how many people come? How many people are involved in other things? Of course, there are some people who genuinely practice purely in other spiritual traditions as well. It's not just us Buddhists that are pure and others aren't. But still, when we look in the light of the world, to practice understanding continuity consciousness, the important for future rebirth, even getting your head around, thinking about being more compassionate, and then having more merit to think about wanting to understand the nature of reality, that takes more merit again, so we need a lot of spiritual money, wealth, kind of our own spiritual bank here to be attracted to that in future lives. Does that help with your question?
Thank you. Yes.
That answers, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Good question. Okay, so this week we want to for the class. Let me just stop the share for the moment. So again, just going over, which I kind of have just went over now, what we covered last week, I want to make us, if nothing else out of this class, I want to make sure we're all very clear on the 3 levels of spiritual development, these 3 main capable beings that I emphasized a few times last week. That we're trying to develop in our hearts and mind, these capabilities, So again, being aware that our consciousness has to migrate, trying to get a deeper sense of continuity consciousness, our Buddha nature, this subtle aspect of us, subtle mind, that carries all these imprints, taking us from life to life to life, And so what imprints are we taking with us in our future lives? This is what we have to think about all the time. Karmic impressions, karma, what karma are we creating and how that's going to land in our future lives. So first level of compassion we want to develop on the spiritual path is taking care. First level of capability on the spiritual path is making sure, and that's what qualified gurus do for us. They make sure that we create enough merit and karma that we have a good future rebirth. Yeah. So we land again in a precious human life, or we land again, maybe even in the pure realm, who knows? But that's kind of it doesn't sit, again, we don't come necessarily the Dharma for that, with that in mind, but that's how the Lamrim is set out. And that's what we need to take care of first as a, Dharma practitioner. Second level is getting a deeper understanding as we go into the next module of our own samsara, how karma and delusion are operating in our mind and creating this samsara, creating rebirth. And how do we free ourselves from that? What methods, do we use? So this is what we go over more in the second module, really understanding the nature of our own existence, right now, conventionally where we are, and then developing a sort of faith, an interest. It's called renunciation, this keenness to want to get out of samsara. To liberate our mind from that, once we understand the different aspects of our own samsara, suffering and the causes of suffering, how it presents itself in our mind and our heart. And then on that basis, recognizing it as a dissatisfactory state of mind, then we develop the causes to get out of samsara, concentration, wisdom. Then the last level is spiritual being, the higher level, great capable being, is someone who is gained out some kind of conviction in the qualities of bodhicitta, the qualities of bodhisattvas, as we see Lama Zopa Rinpoche, His Holiness, Lama Yeshe, many other beings, and of course they're outside the Buddhist tradition as well. We have we've had some great beings come to this world, bodhisattvas. In the light of the Buddhist teachings, we would say that Jesus was definitely a great bodhisattva, St. Francis of Assisi was a great bodhisattva, because they moved people's minds into virtue. They had the power and a presence to be able to do that. So we can also develop that quality. We can become saints too. And how do we do that? Is primarily through this development of bodhicitta. So these are the 3 levels of kind of spiritual development we want to move into as we move through the Lam Rim. That's how it's set up. So again, the 2 causes of refuge. Last week, the first one was being aware of these 3 levels of capable beings, being aware that we want to achieve that, aware of where we are and where we want to go. So the second cause of refuge is actually having a faith or conviction in the Buddha, the Dharma and Sangha. So we have an awareness of the path, a real awareness, kind of, where we are right now, where we want to go, and then developing a faith and conviction that the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha are going to be our kind of saviors, that we're going to rely on them to achieve these different levels of spiritual quality and realizations as we move through the Lam Rim. So again, what faith is not, when we hear this word faith, it doesn't always have a great connotation in the West because, especially if we've already come from a religious tradition, sometimes we feel like, well, faith is just this kind of blind faith, So here we're not talking about a faith that's rooted as blind faith or simply accepting spiritual authority without a deep investigation on our part. And I mentioned this in the first module. And it's not simply reciting with our mouth, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha like a parrot, That's not what faith is. So this is I'll bring up this, share my PowerPoint again. So this is how we develop faith is really like this, The Buddha pointed this out in a sutra, He said, O bhikshus and the wise, just as a goldsmith tests his gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it. So you must examine my words and accept them, but not merely out of reverence, but out of, through a deep investigation. So again, some of you have come up across this analogy before, but I think it's a really good way to really kind of ensure for us the authenticity. We need to be sure of the authenticity of the teaching. So here it says, we need to check, just like we check the quality of gold, we need to check the teachings, and that's how we develop faith. First of all, burning, you could say burning as an analogy for listening and testing, according to our level of intelligence or merit or karma. We test, we listen, we test the authenticity of the teachings. Do they ring true for us? So we could say in that level, that's the burning level for us. We have to listen. You know, because how do we develop faith? We develop faith, first of all, by listening. Then cutting could be similar to when they cut gold, it reveals the sort of consistency and purity of the gold. So similarly, when we reflect on the teachings, when we read, you know, reflecting is more at the level of reading or maybe debate. So we're sort of analysing the teaching on a deeper level, intellectually, logically, to see if it holds up for you, you know. So again, we go a little bit deeper, and that we start to get more conviction as we listen, we reflect. And then the last one, rubbing, is similar to meditating on the teachings. It kind of really shows the quality of the gold. So the same way, by meditating on the teachings, we try to see, well, does this really apply to me? Does this really transform my mind? Does it bring clarity, compassion, peace, insight when I meditate on the teachings? So that's what brings about faith. That's a solid, organic, healthy faith. And this is something, no matter how long you've been practicing the Dharma, you know, we always have to attend. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I mean, he, you know, even though Rinpoche was, there's no question when I met Rinpoche 30 years ago, he was already a holy being. But he still manifested attending teachings, going to initiations, listening to the Dharma, you know, he would listen to his teachers for many years through tapes and recordings, you know. So, and even then, so he was already a great being, so never mind us. And it's through listening that you know, it's the listening, there's as I say, there's a wisdom that we achieve through listening, you know. And then not just listening alone, we need to reflect, we need to read, we need to think about them. You know, in our daily lives, we can reflect on the teachings when we're doing things, you know, what we just heard. And that goes in a little bit deeper. And then we meditate, it's when it really starts to go into the heart, you know. And that's when the faith and conviction become stronger, you know, when it starts to move into the heart. So His Holiness says, you know, so another thing, you know, another word for a Buddhist, there's a few different words. But another word for a Buddhist practitioner, I think it says really, it expresses really well where we want to go in our practice, you know. Expresses really well, again, this quality of faith, you know, because we need to go inward. So the word for a sort of Buddhist practitioner is a nagpa, an inner being. And that expresses, as His Holiness says, this kind of internal commitment we have to our spiritual practice that motivates us to humbly seek spiritual guidance. And as I say, even Lama Zopa Rinpoche, even though he's a great, great holy being, continually seeking the teachings, reflecting on the teachings, meditating on the teachings. This is an ongoing kind of habit we need to create, you know, if we really want to have inner development, you know, and develop this quality of faith, conviction in the teachings. It's the only way it's going to happen. This is the process. So sometimes I like to use the analogy of our faith developing just like a flower or, you know, or this is a lotus here, opens, you know. It's like maybe at the start we're quite closed, you know. So there's these three levels of faith that start, we all go through this. And we go through this with different topics, you know. Not just like the whole Buddha Dharma as a whole, but there's certain times we hear things in the Dharma and we can't accept that right now. So as I say, many of you have heard this expression, we put that on the back burner. If there's certain things like, you know, especially teachings on, the lower realms, or maybe even teachings on the subtleties of karma that we can't quite take in right now. We might be able to take the more grosser teachings on karma because we can kind of see them operate in our life, but the subtleties of karma are very hard to see and accept at our level. But, you know, but there's other aspects of the teachings that I think, wow, you know, that really resonates with me, you know, I can really see that, I can understand that. And that's kind of when we start at the first stage, when we develop faith, you know, it's when that lotus of our mind starts to open and we get a clearing or admiring faith. We gain an admirational confidence for when we start studying the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and start understanding what they can do for us. Like maybe Buddha nature, one of the most inspiring teachings is like, wow, I can change. Oh, that's really exciting, Wow, I can get enlightened. That's really exciting, Even if it feels like quite far away, but we get a lot of, it's like, wow, we feel wow, 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 so excited, about teachings, and it's good to hold on to that, So that's the first level that we kind of go through. This is clearing and admiring faith. It's like it's a kind of joyful, clear, and inspired mind. It uplifts us. And we start to feel a little bit devotion, even, a little bit like attraction towards those teachings, or maybe a particular teacher who embodies those qualities. And it's good to recognize that in ourselves and feel, wow, this is wonderful. Because some of us feel like, oh, I'll never have faith. I don't know what faith is, or, but that's the opening of our faith, the opening of the lotus when we have that level of faith. Next one, aspiring or wishing faith. So this is when the lotus is starting to open a little bit more, second level of faith. We not only admire the qualities of the holy beings, but we aspire to become like them. So there's if one does decide to take refuge, some of us may have already, some of us may have taken bodhisattva vows, but this is very similar when we hear the teachings on bodhicitta and we decide, oh, of course, maybe we've taken refuge already, and then we hear the teachings on bodhicitta and we start to think, wow, that's a wonderful thing to be able to develop those qualities. So in the beginning, what we can, and also to develop bodhicitta, just like when we take refuge, we have vows, certain vows or commitments that we keep. So similarly, when we take when we develop an interest in bodhicitta, we can take what we call bodhisattva vows, and they hold and support the mind to develop bodhicitta. They're set up for that way. They're like the ground again, or the vessel for bodhicitta, these vows. So in the beginning, what you can do is actually you can take aspiring bodhisattva vows, And this is similar here, this kind of aspiration. Our minds are enthusiastic. We see our potential and want to develop that potential. It's an open and joyful state of mind that makes us willing to learn and willing to practice. So at the level of these bodhisattva vows, you might feel, well, I'm not quite ready to do that right now, but I feel very inspired. So you can take something called aspiring bodhisattva vows. I aspire to take them. So this is at the level of here. It's like, again, how wonderful it would be. I'm really like wanting to move in that direction. So our minds become even more open, more enthusiastic, more energy, more joy, more joyful when we hear some of the teachings. And again, we might not have this for all the aspects of the teachings, but those that we do, we work on them, we start to develop our deeper understanding and conviction in those aspects of the teachings. And that can purify our mind so that we then start to understand the other more difficult, more subtle aspects of the teaching. So as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, it's a sort of deep wish to want to cultivate the path and attain the results. And it's a motivating factor that we want to practice, engage more deeply in the teachings. Aspiring faith. I mean, it kind of makes sense, yeah, but our mind actually does go through those phases. And it should do. This is the organic way to develop faith, not like, oh, wow, this was so amazing, I'm definitely going to do it, and then you crash and burn, So we want to go through these phases of faith, towards the teachings, and also our teachers, and all the different aspects of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, So the last level of faith, when the lotus of our mind opens even more fully, it's become more and more open, convinced faith or faith of conviction. The third type of confidence comes from conviction. This happens when we've really understood something and we have it's like almost like it's become our truth. We have a deep conviction in that. And it's very much based on reason, analysis, and also experience in meditation. It really comes more from some sort of kind of experiences we've had, even if it's just insights, not like, I'm not talking about realizations, but deeper insights into the truth of the teachings. For example, we start to get more insight into how karma works. We start to get a deeper insight, experience into impermanence. And it becomes, even with those experiences, there's a sort of stability and unshakable faith in in that teaching, in the Buddha's teaching. Okay. Oh, sorry. So the other thing about faith is why it's so important, developing our faith, conviction. If you want to use the word conviction, again, faith maybe doesn't have a comfortable feeling, but a conviction, it's important because based on the level of our conviction, our faith in the teachings, our openness, like the flower, like the opening of that lotus. It's like the opening our Buddha nature. Based on that, we're able to receive more blessings. We become more like a sponge than sort of concrete, blocked, something non-porous that doesn't soak in, We want to be, again, in a healthy, organic way, a kind of sponge to receive the sort of nectar of the blessings of the teachings. So it says the compassion and blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are conceivable, but the Buddha's always is omnipresent. The nature of Buddha mind is that Buddha's omniscient is always present with us. But it depends how much blessing, support we get through the blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is very much dependent on our level of faith, conviction, and devotion. So if we have very little faith, conviction, and devotion, that much blessing we get will be that accordingly. However, if we have if we develop a strong faith and devotion in the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, the blessings that we receive from our teacher in the three jewels will be equally immense. So it's important to try to develop this muscle of faith, in a healthy, organic way. And again, how we do it, listening to the teaching and being skillful how we listen, take in what's supporting our understanding right now and maybe leave on the back burner what's not for later. Don't throw all the baby out with the bathwater. Just take in what's helpful. And then you do it, taking some time to reflect in your daily life and your experience through reading, through discussing with others, and then through, however we can, some meditation. Because faith is, in this context, in the Buddhist context, it's not something superficial. It's something, very organic that grows within us that is going to support in a deep way our spiritual path. And I quite like this little quote here. Faith, it doesn't necessarily make things easy, but as our faith and conviction grow, then we start to understand how it's possible, how transformation of the mind, as we receive the blessings of the Buddha, we start to understand, it gives us this kind of energy or power or subtlety to really understand the nature of mind and how it's possible for the mind to change, So another way that Lama Zopa Rinpoche explains the importance of faith. Our faith and devotion act like a lens to allow us to receive the conceivable qualities and blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So it's a very powerful condition, just like the lens. As I said, I think someone asked me last week about Buddha mind, And as I say, when we go into the qualities of the Buddha, we can see that the Buddha has this, Buddha consciousness is with us all the time. Enlightened consciousness is always there, but we need to tune in to the frequency. And how do we tune in? How we tune in is through listening, reflecting, and meditating, and developing this kind of type of faith that allows us to open up more and more and receive the profound blessings of the teachers in the lineage. And again, for most of us, where the faith and conviction really starts is, oh, no. Can you see me on the screen? Yep, good. I don't see me, but you can see me good. I see Siobhan, although she's not got her camera on, so yeah, I think for us, where it really starts in this tradition is getting some real conviction, that we have Buddha nature, that our mind has a capacity, we have a consciousness that goes from life to life, and it has this capacity for transformation. So what I thought I wanted to do just for a few minutes here is to take a few minutes and just think about where we are on the path in terms of your level of faith. So remember, there's three levels of faith. And you may not be there completely and all with it, we probably have different levels of faith depending on what topic we're talking about in Buddhism. So I think I want us to think about a little bit in terms of continuity consciousness. So we have these different levels of faith. First of all, the clearing faith. The first level, where we have an admiration for that, we start to get interested and excited about that. Second level is the aspiring or wishing faith. So we get more admiration. We think, wow, continuity consciousness, the possibility in my Buddha, having this Buddha nature and being able to change it into enlightenment, become more joyful about that. We have an aspiration to do that. Or are we at the level in terms of, the possibility of enlightenment, the having this Buddha nature of we're very convinced about it. So I just wanted us to take a few minutes to think about where we are with that particular teaching, our Buddha nature, this continuity consciousness. Just to reflect on it a few minutes with these three levels of faith. Do we feel quite clear that we have Buddha nature, Buddha essence? Do we have a clarity of that? Or we're still investigating and exploring that in our own experience, which is fine, we have to be quite honest with ourselves. Or are we at the level where we have a deeper conviction in our Buddha nature and have this kind of a deeper aspiration, a more joyful state of mind that really wants to kind of go more deeply into the teachings? We see that potential and we're like a little bit more at the level of wishing or inspiring to develop that potential. The aspirational level, the second level of faith, where we're making some kind of goals for ourselves, perhaps at that stage, in terms of our level of listening, our study, our meditation. Maybe we're making something a little bit more concrete plans on our spiritual path in terms of the Lam Rim. Or even if we don't see ourselves there now, is there a possibility we could get there, you know? We're open to that. Or perhaps we're even at the third level where we're very convinced in the, you know, that we can achieve enlightenment. You know, that this Buddha nature can transform in all the qualities up to enlightenment. We feel a deep conviction in that. It's kind of like, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, quite stable. That understanding of past lives, future lives, the continuity consciousness, at that level of stability. But it's still a little bit fragile, our understanding, which is also okay. So the beauty about faith is that you have to understand we can't push faith in the mind. We can't push our conviction. It's causative, just like the opening of a flower. The opening is the lotus, it comes through causes and conditions. The main causes and conditions are listening. We are an open mind. Giving the teachings our full attention. Then later reflecting on them as much as we can in our daily life, even if we just take one point, like the continuity consciousness, and its beauty that it has for, you know, this potential in Buddhahood that's there, you know, the seed's there. We just need to keep planting more, you know, nurturing that seed. So faith is really as I say, it doesn't make it easy, things that it can, you know, but it gives us incredible strength and power. It's like the most empowering thing we can have on the spiritual path is our faith, our devotion to the teachings. But again, it's something we need to consciously cultivate and sincerely being honest with what level of faith we're at in our mind. And that's okay wherever we are. That's what gives the most energy on the path, is this kind of faith, and that much more our faith is convinced. We have the faith of conviction. I mean, that much more energy we have, you know, it gives it incredible, it's like a mountain, Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, because a mountain's very powerful, very strong, you know, unshakable. Again, to get there, we need to continue to listen, reflect, and meditate. So whatever level of faith we are at now, especially with in light of the teachings on Buddha nature, continuity, consciousness, just take a moment to rejoice. How wonderful it is that I have this level of faith right now. How wonderful it is that I have this level of aspirational faith right now. So generally as Westerners, we tend to look at what we don't have, where we're not yet, but we need to look at what we do have. So when any moment we any feel lightness, openness of faith, just take a moment to be with that, settle with that, and think how wonderful it is. I feel just this moment of faith and openness towards the teaching right now, and just sit with that. Let it ooze through your mind, your consciousness. And that will continue to nurture and strengthen that muscle of faith in the mind that we need to develop as one of the causes of refuge. Okay. Did anyone have any questions or comments with that? Do you able to follow my train of where we were going? Nothing. Yes, Cynthia.
Hi, Venerable Angie. Thank you for your teachings. Appreciate it. I just want to share something that I kind of remembered from Dr. Lauren Ladner's teachings of Lamrim.
Yes.
He mentioned that listening in translated in Tibetan is actually it means learning. So that was really interesting because he explained it extensively why that was important. So you stressing it makes sense in that really it's about not just listening, but really taking it in and learning from it. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yes, great. It's quite interesting when we look at the etymology, which we're going to do next, of a couple of words, to really get a deeper, understanding of their meaning. What are we supposed to be doing there? So that's helpful. Thank you. Anyone else? Question? Comment? Yes, Joey?
Um, is it possible? I mean, it has to be possible because I think that's what I'm experiencing, to be between levels. So moving from, I believe you called the querying
Yes.
first level to the aspirational level, like, getting there, feeling it coming closer, but between.
Yes, I think that's a really good point, Joey. Yeah, and that obviously means you're really checking up there because I think probably many of us might be somewhere there, actually. Because you've been listening now, you're not quite maybe at the next level, but you feel like you're getting there. So yeah, I think definitely we're sort of one and a half, what's that, one and a half way through or something, I don't know. But I think for sure, we see somewhere, and again, we might be at one level, as I say, with one topic, precious human rebirth, or we're on one level there, but we're on another level with another topic because we've thought about that more. And especially once we get to the more difficult topics like wisdom realizing emptiness, I mean, we might stay in the first level for quite a while. And that's okay. But as I say, I think the fundamental one for us as Westerners, and this is how we teach it, start with the mind, is really understanding how this mind has the potential to transform and change. We have to think like that because I think if we don't get there, then the rest doesn't make a lot of sense. And we feel like it's kind of abstract almost. So we have to spend quite a bit of time on that and getting a conviction in that. Of course, when we meditate on the other topics and reflect and listen, we can see our mind changing as well. Investigating that, changing, opening up to that. So, I mean, they all kind of support each other in a way, but the fundamental one is really understanding like the mind is the gateway to all happiness. That is, I mean, that alone is quite huge. Because we have, as I said in the beginning of the class, we have this very strong habit of thinking that external phenomena, others, friends, family, material possessions are, in some way going to bring about a deeper, some sort of happiness and peace. It's not that we all want to live in a nice place and have comfort, be quiet and have a good job or have an easy, in some way, but there's too much taking refuge in that. So, and we don't, if we really investigate that deeply, none of them have the power to bring about everlasting peace and happiness. It's all very much dependent on our state of mind. how we work with phenomena, how we work with others. And of course, at the level of someone like Milarepa, who is a great yogi. Some of us have heard of Milarepa, the cotton-clad one, a great practitioner, one of the most famous saints in the Buddhist tradition, incredibly inspiring. Has anybody read Milarepa's life story here? Has anyone heard? How many of us have heard about Milarepa? You can put your hand up. Yeah, I see quite a few hands there. Well, in the yeah, see quite a few hands, good. Well, when the thing, Milarepa's really the epitome. It's like, of course, he achieved enlightenment in one life. And he was like the most extreme level of practitioner you could find. But, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, he achieved a state where he didn't have 1 rupee, or we could say in the West, 1 cent. He had no clothes, he had no possessions, and he wore just a white, simple cloth. But he had the most amount of happiness. He achieved all the inner peace and happiness. So you no longer needed all these other things, So of course we can't just like throw away all our clothes and our possessions. That's not what renunciation is, There was a misconception in the early years for many years in the Dharma. Because in the early years, I mean, again, this is how fortunate we are. And to remember the kindness. Some of my peers in the Dharma, when they met the Dharma in the 70s, 60s, 70s, there was no translations. There was no, nothing was translated. They would go and sit in teachings and it was all in Tibetan. But that was their level of faith. I mean, it's quite incredible. These Tibetan masters would come in the very early years and there wasn't many translators, not many people could speak English. Or if they could, it was almost like, they could only translate a few words. I think at one point we had I think in the early days they had a geshe here and the person translating was just making it up. He wasn't translating what the geshe said, He was just kind of making something up and having the appearance of translating, So, but right now we have, first of all, if there's high lamas come, we have great translators, and also we have so much translated into English. So again, in the early years, when some of my peers went to Kopan, one of the first books that was translated was the biography of Milarepa. So, of course, everybody reads the life story of Milarepa. He was a great meditator. He just gave up all his possessions and went off to the mountains, and he lived off on nettles. He turned green because he only ate nettles. He sustained himself on nettles for, 20, 25 years. Because that's what was available. He turned, his skin ended up with a huey green. Sometimes he's painted with this kind of colour of a huey green because that's what he sustained himself on. But he achieved all the levels of realizations up to enlightenment. And Rinpoche would always say, he didn't have 1 cent or rupee, but he had all the wealth of the Dharma, all the wealth of inner happiness. So, of course, his life story was the only thing that was one of the only books that English speakers could read. So I think they understood renunciation to be, well, you just be like Milarepa and you give up all your possessions and you just, you go to the mountains because that's all there was available. And the lamas were teaching on renunciation. And of course, the translations weren't as great as they are now. So, so I remember Lama Zopa Rinpoche mentioning in one course, there was a Westerner. And of course, in the early days in Kopan, it was all hippies who were coming to Kopan, They were arriving there, so they already given up a lot of their possessions, living a hippie lifestyle. And he said one Westerner turned up and all he had was a thin cloth. He wore this very thin white kind of cloth, and he says, Rinpoche says you could see through it. So he was turning up to the teachings with this sort of see-through cloth because he probably thought, well, I'm really renounced, but and again, that's not what renunciation is. As Rinpoche says, renunciation is something internal, and when you get to the point of really understanding the nature of samsara and wanting to achieve liberation from that and developing certain inner levels of contentment, then yes, you can practice like that. But the mind's very happy. You've already developed some kind of inner realization where there's no problem if you have food or not. There's no problem if you have clothes or not. There's no problem if you have a house or not. But that's quite a high level of inner development. And that's kind of what we're looking at renunciation, because the mind's really just seeking liberation. It's already let go of the fetters that kind of bind us, these attachments. But we're not asked to just give away everything right away and then we're renounced, because it's a change of mind, it's a change of attitude. So I always find that story quite amusing. Because we can sort of jump into that. But again, the Dharma is something very organic that we cultivate, or through the Lam Rim, through meditating on preciousness of human life, especially when we meditate in death and impermanence. That's a very strong meditation for helping us to let go of attachment. When the mind's in that state, it's a very peaceful state of mind that's kind of not clinging. It helps the mind to kind of stop clinging at phenomena in a way that's kind of disturbing the mind, that's not realistic. It's a very spacious state of mind that's kind of very much more focused on being this inner being, this inner practitioner, and striving for the other levels of spiritual development, liberation and enlightenment. So I just wanted to mention that again, everything like developing faith, developing all these we need to put the work in, and then we achieve the experiences, the inner experience of that. Any other questions or comments before I go on to the next slide? Okay, so we've covered that one already. So just to finish off for the last 10 minutes tonight, I just want to touch on, so faith and conviction, so we have these 3 levels of faith, how they kind of start to form in the mind. So faith and conviction, so we're looking at how do we develop faith and conviction in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha? Well, by studying their qualities, gaining some conviction in their qualities and their ability to be able to support us to transform our mind. So the 3 jewels of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha are often referred to the 3 jewels. Well, jewels is something precious, so we regard the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha as something very precious. We rely on them for our spiritual development. Lama Zopa Rinpoche would translate the 3 jewels as Rinpoche's translation was the 3 Rare Sublime Ones. So first of all, we're talking about the quality of the Buddha, rare, So the coming of a Buddha is often compared to the rarity of a Udambara flower. So an Udambara flower it actually is one that it's a kind of mythical bloom, although it does actually exist, but it appears very rarely. It blooms once in every 3,000 years. And so it symbolizes the coming of a Buddha because it kind of blooms so exceptionally and frequently. And actually it's said that before the Buddha came to this world, there was the blooming of this special flower, this Udambara flower. So when that flowers, it usually shows the coming of a great being. So here we also have the Buddha jewel is the ultimate refuge in that the enlightened mind that is free of all faults and endowed with all sublime qualities is the final goal that we seek to achieve. So that is, of course, the state of Buddhahood in terms of being a Dharma practitioner. That's what we are trying to achieve. So Buddha and again, just looking at etymology, because as I say, it kind of helps, where am I here? I had something else here. Where did I put I had something in my notes. Can't find it though. But it does say here Sangha. Oh, sorry, actually Buddha. Buddha in Sanskrit, it actually means the awakened one. So that's enlightened or awakened one. So the word in Tibetan is Sangha. So as we can see here, Sangha means having totally purified obscurations which interfere with perfect realizations. This is Rinpoche's translation, but it means Sang means one who is totally purified, so has no more faults. Faultless. So maybe before we met the Dharma, we thought we were faultless. We have moments where we're perfect or we thought we were okay. And then we meet the Dharma and we get this whole rundown of what's wrong with us. So, but the Buddha, so it's true, many people in the world think, well, I'm okay, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm fine. But once we meet the Dharma, we discover suffering and the causes of suffering, and then we get this rundown of all the faults of the mind. So when we really go dive more deeply into that sang, having totally purified all the obscurations, we have gross obscurations, which are our obscurations to liberation, which mean karma and delusions. Two main causes of suffering: karma, or contaminated karma, and delusion. Ignorance, grasping at true existence. Other delusions. What are other delusions that we've got? Anyone? What other things are not purified in our minds? Robert, you would.
I'm not sure. Does it, things are permanent? We also, maybe when we feel things, that they inherently do not have the property that we're feeling, the emotion. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly.
So it's good to know, the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths. I'm going to give this as a wee test next week, just for us to go over the Four Noble Truths. So, because this is the foundational teaching. I mean, I know you get so many teachings, but because this is referring to what's not, anyone else, what's not purified in our mind? What are the delusions in our mind that we need to purify? So we have karma, action that's going to cause suffering in the future. Delusions. Zela.
There's so much that's not purified. I don't know if there's
three main delusions. Let's say that to give you Zela, three main delusions.
Cynthia has one.
Cynthia. Zela's getting out of it.
Is it anger, attachment, and wrong view?
Correct, yeah. Yes, very good. Well, Cynthia's done a few courses, haven't you, Cynthia? So well done for you. Yeah, so just, this is what we need to work on, the three main delusions. And again, in the next module, to be fair, this is what we cover more in the next module, samsara and nirvana. What is the nature of our samsara that's unpurified? What's the Buddha purified that I haven't? He's purified the delusion of attachment in the mind, clinging, grasping, clinging, attachment. He's purified all stains of anger in the mind. I mean, maybe many of us don't get really angry, but how many of us don't get agitated? Can anybody see here? Yeah, I never get agitated by anything, I'm okay, I'm cool with everything, I don't think any of us could probably say that, yeah. And then, and what causes all this? The main cause of the three delusions, the other delusions, of course, we have pride that I mentioned last week, we have jealousy, we have miserliness, and there's a whole other range of more less obvious ones. These are the main ones, but they're all rooted in, they all come about because we have, as Cynthia said, a wrong view of self, which is due to the ignorance. As the blind turtle, remember the analogy of the turtle was blind, yeah? So he not only just lived at the bottom of the sea and came up over 100,000 years, the turtle signifies us, yeah? And we are the blind turtle because we're blinded by ignorance. What does ignorance come from? To ignore. So there's it's like we don't intentionally ignore things, but there's this quality ignorance in the mind or not quality, energy of ignorance, delusion of ignorance in the mind that prevents us from seeing how things actually exist. And so we're under the control, as Cynthia said, of the wrong view of reality due to ignorance pervading our mind right now. And again, this is what you explore more when you go into the second level, middle capable being and higher capable being. So that'll become a bit more clear. You're going to hear it more often, so you'll be able to, if I asked you again in a few modules' time, if we were there, then I think you would get it at that point, because you'll have heard it there. So the Buddha is someone who has completely removed all those faults for the mind. Gross obscurations, and then there's a very subtle obscuration, more subtle, which we're removing on at the higher level of practice, higher capable being, called a subtle type of, I mean, I mentioned this last week as well, a type of self-cherishing. So we've removed the wrong view of self, but there's a subtle way where we still cherish ourselves or kind of hold on to a sense of ourselves being more important. And so that basically means our compassion for others is not fully developed. So that's what we do on the higher level of capability being. We're developing our compassion even more fully for others so we can become a guide, a guru for others. So a Buddha is someone who's fully developed wisdom. All the power that our consciousness has to develop wisdom, it's fully developed. He's fully developed compassion, the quality of compassion, bodhicitta for others. There's no more to develop. And he's fully developed what we call a certain type of power. And this is what it's gye, you know. Sang is the purified aspect of the mind, and gye is, describing how the Buddha's developed all these three main qualities of a Buddha: compassion, power, wisdom, and power. There's the three main qualities that the Buddha's achieved and fully developed. There's no more to develop there. There's actually 5 paths that we go through on the spiritual path, and the last one is called the path and no more learning. And it's very much in tune with what Cynthia was saying before. We have to continually learn by listening and reflecting, meditating. But when you achieve the state of the Buddha, there's no more learning. And that's when you're at the state of Buddhahood, when you're at the path and no more learning. Before that, there's always learning. That's why even at our level, at all levels, we have to develop a learner's mind. Murray? SRM. Sorry, what's your name, Murray? Big Murray. What's your name
I'm
again?
Patrick McMurray. I'm sorry, I just tuned in. I realized that subtle that I'm exhausted. I came in last week. I just have I'm listening.
Yeah,
very
remember you
intently.
came last week. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. So sorry to be late.
No worries.
Can I ask a question a little off topic, but it kind of connects
Yes.
to my mind? What is an arhat?
Yes, an arhat. Well, this is a good question here. Anyone know what an arhat is? Maybe we get someone. Robert?
Let's see if I can get
say-
this one right. It's somebody who's realized emptiness is one way. Is that correct?
Yes. So an arhat is someone, or another way of putting it, is someone who's achieved liberation from samsara. So he's no longer cycling in birth and death. So he ceased the cycling of samsara. So because he's had a direct perception of the wisdom realizing emptiness. So they have ceased the grosser delusions on the mind. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're just going to go quickly, just a couple of more points, and then I'm going to finish off for tonight. So in terms of the qualities of the Buddha, the 3 qualities, just to finish off. So I said the Buddha has these 3 qualities: compassion. So he has power over all selfishness. There's not even a slight selfishness. There's not even a slight thought of like me, myself, or I in the Buddha's mind, or I need this, or I'm more important than someone else. That sense of my happiness or my needs being more important than others, that doesn't come up. That doesn't appear in the Buddha's mind because his mind's completely developed in the thought cherishing others more than self. That's what we'll go through in the bodhicitta module when you cover that. And in terms of wisdom, as I mentioned before, again, he's completely removed any stains of kind of ego grasping, perceiving an individual, independent view of self. That's completely eliminated for the mind because he's developed all the wisdom, which is the antidote to wrong view of self. And the other quality, and there's many powers actually that the Buddha has, but he has this quality of power as well, you know. So one of the powers that the Buddha has, that he has power over life. So he can choose to pass away, die, incarnate at any time. They have that power in mind that enables them to be able to do that. You know, so even at the time when the Buddha was alive, and he had reached, I think the Buddha either passed away 80 or 83. I'm not quite sure. I've heard different. I think it was possibly at the age of 80. But the Buddha, from his side, decided to pass away, you know, around that age. And I mean, he didn't say anything to the disciples, but he must have made some decision, as great holy beings do. They decide themselves when they're no longer, they've benefited the disciples and students as much as they feel in that incarnation. So they make a conscious decision because they can. You have power over life and death to pass away. So it's said that the Buddha, around about that time, when he was obviously making the decision to pass away, he was invited to one family's house for lunch, and he could see with his clairvoyance that the food was contaminated. It wasn't purposely by the people who offer lunch, because the Buddha in his life would go around with an alms bowl and would take lunch wherever it was offered, you know, in the community. So he was offered to go to lunch, and he went with a few disciples to one benefactor's house, and he could see with his clairvoyance that the food was contaminated, but he'd already made a decision to pass away. So and it wasn't all the dishes, but I think the Buddha could see that one of the dishes was contaminated, so he purposely said to his disciples not to take that dish, but he himself took the food. Knowing that it was going to, you know, he was going to manifest sickness from that. And he did. He got food poisoning from that. And after a few days, few days, he passed away. But that was the way that he decided to pass. So he still wanted the benefactors to receive the merit from offering the food. But he decided this was how, there was a time he was going to pass away, and that's how he was going to pass away. So he could see that, but he partook of the food, and that was the way he manifested passing. So, but again, he had complete control over that process, and he knew, he just decided that was going to be the condition. And that also he wanted the disciples, still, his great compassion, to receive the merit from offering the food. So generally, this is what we say about all the holy beings, because of their clairvoyance, their ability to see everything, they have complete power, many, many powers over phenomena, over being. And next week, I'm going to go into, in 2 weeks' time, a few other examples of showing the Buddha's power. And this is where we get a lot of inspiration when we read the life story of the Buddha. There's actually a set called the Jataka Tales, and every year, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is not teaching, a lot at the moment. He's mainly attending prayers and seeing people in public audiences, but usually around Losar, the Tibetan New Year, His Holiness the Dalai Lama does teach one of the Jataka Tales, which are the previous life stories, some of the previous lives of the Buddha before he achieved Buddhahood. And they all talk about some of the feats that even he did during those lifetimes, as well as many of the stories that we can read in the sutras when the Buddha was alive, as some of the great feats he did. So in the next class, we're going to go a little bit more into the qualities. What are the qualities of the Buddha? What does Buddhahood look like, when I'm going to become a Buddha? What qualities can I expect to gain? What do I want to aspire to gain? So this is what we'll investigate more in the next class, the qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the Dharma, and the qualities of the Sangha. And again, the more we listen, we reflect and meditate on these, the more we sort of hopefully gain some conviction, and also reading biographies of last holy beings who have practiced in the past, seeing others, even looking at Sangha, even looking at other Dharma practitioners, seeing, they have some of those qualities, so it must be possible for me. So that's kind of how we develop our faith and conviction. So I think as to lead, as going away from the class, I just want us to take a moment to just take a moment to see what it is you can take away from this week, something that hopefully touched your mind, opened up maybe that blossoming of faith a little bit in your heart and mind, more interest to want to investigate that, study and read about that. Taking heart that we all have a level of faith right now. But our faith can be quite fragile, so we need to nurture it through listening, reflection, and meditation. That's a way to nurture, develop, and grow this kind of beautiful heart of faith that we can all have, and is really the main energy and inspiration in spiritual practice. And through that nurturing, it's possible, we can develop all these beautiful qualities, a renunciation, bodhicitta, and this wisdom realizing emptiness, wisdom that can cut through all the delusions, the wisdom that the arhat has developed. So no longer have to cycle in existence. How wonderful it would be if we all were able to achieve that. And how wonderful it will be even if we just get to start thinking more about this quality bodhicitta here in this prayer that we always pray to develop. It's the most precious quality in the Buddhist path. Wisdom, this quality of bodhicitta that, as the Buddha has embodied in the Buddha, is a kind of mind that's completely selfless, completely only focused on others, full of compassion for others, this mind of bodhicitta. So we always dedicate for that, for ourselves and for all sentient beings. So we'll just finish with this prayer. I'm going to recite once in Tibetan for just so we get familiar with it. When we're at teachings with higher lamas, we always recite this, so you get familiar to hearing the Tibetan. So we'll recite this in Tibetan once and once in English, and just the wisdom realizing emptiness, just for our wisdom to grow and grow, just like that, as we see in the Buddha, to fully blossom and start to blossom and continually blossom in our heart and mind as we see in the example of the Buddha and some of your teachers. May that grow in my mind and the mind of all sentient beings. Chanju Senju Rinpoche Mage Banam Gegurshi Geba Nyamba Meba Yi Gonne Gondu Belwar Shuk. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline but increase more and more. In His Holiness's long life prayer. Incomparable, kind, and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Okay, thank you so much. So enjoy the rest of your week. And again, if you have any questions, then you can contact the SPC at TNL and they can give you my email address. If you have any in particular, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments. And in the meantime, I will send, oh, Zela's got it up there. I will send, in the next 2 or 3 days, I'll ask Venerable Dundrup to send you just a couple of things to think about for the next class, since we're going to miss a week. Barbara, is this your first week at the class?
Copy the email for you.
Venerable, it is, yes.
Yeah.
And I got goofed up on the time this evening as well. So, but at least I'm glad I was able to tune in for what I did. It was very helpful.
Okay, great. Thank you. Nice to see you. Are you in Santa Fe, Barbara?
No, I'm actually in Bend, Oregon, but I spend a lot of time in Santa Fe at the
Okay.
center.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
we have-
Thank you for your teaching. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we have a 2-week gap, but hopefully we won't lose too many people. Come back in 2 weeks. We've got 2 more classes, plus we have a practice day as well. I think it's on August 23rd, so okay. Thank you so
I
much.
have a quick question, if I
Yeah,
may.
yeah, yeah. If
Are
anyone has
you-
questions, I'm happy to stay on. I have time if you want to stay on for 10 minutes. But for those of you who need to leave, it's fine. So just leave if you need to. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. So
Are
who has-
these classes, are they recorded? If we want to review them,
Zela.
possible?
Yes, she says.
Absolutely. If you go to our website, at the top of every single page, you'll see the YouTube channel. Click
Okay.
that, and it'll take you right to it. You look for Venerable Angie, or you can search her name.
Thank you.
Everything's there within 24 hours. Rick will have
Wow.
everything up in about 24 hours. So
Thank
easy.
you.
That's
Great.
great. I remember when I first started teaching, because I hadn't taught for years, and then now I started, and it's all like everything's on YouTube, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm all over the place. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know if I wanted that, but I guess if it's helpful, but I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to be all over the internet, Anyway,
Like
I hope
Googling
it
yourself.
helps. I hope it helps. We have a few things in the Tim, is there anything else in the chat that I missed? Okay, yeah, that's it. There's nothing else there. I know that you keep in touch with the chat. So Nima and Visha, you have a question?
I do, Venerable. I was reading the Lama Muir, and
Yes.
on 139, it says that the Buddha was completely free from all fear and suffering. By destroying both his gross and subtle delusions, he freed himself from the two great fears. And I've been Googling and asking, and I can't seem to find what those two great fears are.
Well, I'm imagining that it's the fear of, well, when we look at the other way that when we study the refuge, actually, there's these three fears that we want to develop, three fears that we want to be aware of, three things that we need to avoid. First of all, what's the first one? The first thing that we're avoiding is lower rebirth, right? I know some of us may not be quite there with lower rebirth and the hells and the animals that we could possibly go there, but I tried to explain it last week, like, at least none of us want to go to some war-torn, nobody, even in this life, wants to go to somewhere scary, frightening, impoverished. Nobody wants there, so we have to think about that in future lives if we have continuity consciousness. So the fear there that you develop is it's kind of a fear or awareness of the lower realms. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next one is, I'm thinking, might be one of the fears that it's referring to is the fear of some cyclic existence.
Okay.
Basically, if we think about it, when we really meditate on these topics, it's quite terrifying that we've been in this cycle of existence from beginningless lives. We've had bodies stacked up. I mean, the use of I'm not going into this depth in this class, but when you go into the traditional Lam Rin text, you are supposed to develop this kind of aversion to samsara, like thinking about your cyclic existence, or being like kind of used, like Rinpoche used to use the expression, being like in the middle of a fire. If we were in our head, we were in the middle of a fire, like we found ourselves in the middle of a burning house. There'd be so much fear, you would be like, I need to get out of here. Yeah. But the fear motivates you to get out. So it's a little bit like thinking about how long we've been in samsara and cyclic existence, how many rebirths we've had. I mentioned about a friend who remembered being a horse many times, being a fish many times. That's not something you kind of, you don't sort of boast about that, do you? Oh, wow. But she wasn't even Buddhist. She just remembered that. So when we think about that really deeply, it can create like this kind of fear or aversion. So I think that fear is referring to that type of fear, the fears of samsara.
Okay.
And the third one is, it's like the thinking more deeply about the faults of self-cherishing. So even for an arhat, Cynthia was saying that, someone asked me about an arhat. Who is an arhat? Was it Cynthia? No, maybe not, because I think Cynthia might know, but.
It was Mari. It was Mari.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, you know, even for a bodhisattva, you know, being under the control of selfishness is unbearable. When you get sensitive to your level of self-concern, it's quite unbearable for a bodhisattva. It's fearful. So I think it's referring to mostly the fears of when we really understand the faults of self-grasping and self-cherishing. I think it's those two fears.
Okay.
Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
will go over it. I mean, again, not myself, but when you go into the other modules, we haven't got to the other modules yet, but that's what you cover in the last two modules. Those two main they're not delusions as such. Self-grasping is, and self-cherishing. So they're actually, for bodhisattvas, holy beings, they're freeful states of mind. You know, you don't want to be under control of them because of the repercussions, what they bring.
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for anybody who stayed on, or you're just listening? Zayla, you probably need to go as well, so we'll let you go. I forgot that you're hosting and you've got a 6-year-old there. So, okay, thank you so much, everyone, and we'll hopefully see you in a couple of weeks. Yeah, have a good 2
Thank you,
weeks.
Venerable.